and I am now going to um, turn you over to Piera Siegert. She is the state plant regulatory official for New Hampshire Department of Agriculture. She has a nursery that we did reach out to, and fortunately for them, they're very busy right now. Unfortunately for us, they weren't able to speak, but they did tell Piera that they would be happy for her to share their story on for New Hampshire of what happened when they found some live spotted lanternfly egg masses. It's very interesting, and I think that all of us can gather some good information to take back to work with our industry. And I think it's just outstanding the partnership that Piera has with her nursery industry, that they are so willing to work with her and partner with her to find solutions. So, Piera, thank you very much for being with us today. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dana. I thank you for that introduction, and hopefully I will set this up correctly. And I believe that we are now screen sharing, and I hopefully am not in presenter mode. So yes, so Millican Nurseries is one of our largest, if not our largest, wholesale retailer of trees and shrubs in the state of New Hampshire. We've worked with them very closely over the years on a number of different projects. We do have a good working relationship with them. When we first found spotted lanternfly egg masses that had been introduced to Millican Nurseries that year, we recognized that there was a risk associated with movement to that nursery because they do import so much nursery stock, and they were really willing to look and see what their role could be in minimizing the risk of spread on the plants that they were bringing into the state and then further distributing. So I want to make sure that you guys know that everything in this slideshow, although I am presenting it, was actually put together by Alan Catabriga and Kayla Walters from Millican Nurseries. This is all their verbiage, and after I put together the slideshow, I ran it by them to make sure that they were okay with it. So sometimes it says we, and the we isn't really me, it's actually Alan and Kayla. And I'll try to make that distinction between when the nursery is speaking and when I'm adding commentary. So with that, did that advance or no? There it goes. At least I think it's advanced. If it hasn't, then somebody's going to need to let me know that. All right, so about Millican Nurseries, their goal is to sell the highest quality plant material in the Northeast and to have enough on hand to satisfy a large customer base. They are a 60-acre wholesale nursery in Chichester, which is in about the middle of the state, and they have an additional extra 50 acres in production. About 15% of their nursery stock is grown on site, and so the rest of it is brought in from other states and provinces, and they draw in from quite a large area, but a lot of their material does originate from the mid-Atlantic states. Their stock includes very large caliper trees, as well as many one-of-a-kind specimen trees, and they have between 60 and 80 employees. So one point that I like to make a lot is that we do not know that we have any established spotted lanternfly in the state of New Hampshire. And so the question is, so we don't have established spotted lanternfly, so why would a nursery maybe want to implement best management practices in order to reduce the spread of spotted lanternfly? And the reason is, as Dana alluded to, and as I covered in the SLF 101 session in more detail, so it's part of the same story that you heard then too. In 2020, Millican's reported live adult SLF in their nursery around Labor Day. Going back through the nursery and in the blocks where the adult SLF were found, we did determine that some trees had been brought in the spring of 2020 that contained live egg masses. And so we did a whole response. It involved about 20 different surveys, 3 insecticide sprays, a stop sale, and it required inspections and training. What I'm going to focus on and what they wanted to focus on is how did they move forward following that 2020 detection in implementing best management practices to reduce their risk of spreading spotted lanternfly. In discussion with Millicans, we wanted to make it really clear what we saw the risks of spotted lanternfly to New Hampshire. And so we identified for them that the risks were to New Hampshire trade and industry as a public nuisance pest, impacting the general public, tourism, and agritourism. And tourism is an important industry in the state. As well as to the state's grape growers, and as an additional plant stressor for other specialty crops produced in the state, including the nursery stock, which accounts for about 33% of the agricultural sales in New Hampshire. So we partnered with Millican Nurseries, or maybe it's more appropriate to say they partnered with us. They did quite a bit on this in mitigating the introduction in 2020. It was a significant response. They put a lot of effort and work into it, as did my staff. It involved stop sale orders, inspection requirements in order for trees and shrubs to leave the property, record keeping requirements, multiple insecticide treatments of several blocks of nursery stock. And as I said, we did about 20 surveys. There were 3 different treatments of bifenthrin and lots of training and record keeping. And then after the kind of the dust settled on that initial response, we wanted to be a little bit more proactive and look forward to knowing that this was likely not a one-off, the only time that eggs were going to come in on nursery stock. How could Millican and other New Hampshire nurseries be more proactive in addressing these risks before the eggs actually got to a point where they were hatching? And so we worked with Millican nurseries to develop some best management practices for the industry that they were able to review and let us know that these were realistic for the way that they practiced, the plant sales. We anticipated that using best management practices would reduce the scope of a future response and maintain Millican's goals of providing high quality nursery stock and maintain their reputation. And I will put the link for the PDF for these BMPs into the chat at the close of my talking points here. So step 1 starts with education. And so after that initial 2020 detection, there were trainings that were conducted for the entirety of Millican Nurseries staff. We have an established and good working relationship with Millicans. And again, these are their talking points. So that's why they said with the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture, the relationship is considered positive on both sides of it. The Millican Nursery staff has been educated about all aspects of potential issues within the industry, including training on what to look for with spotted lanternfly and when, factual information about potential damage to other crops when pests are moved in nursery stock. The training has happened both formally at workshops and meetings and at trainings, and informally during inspections when we're walking around and showing folks what we're looking at. Following the 2020 spotted lanternfly interception, the entirety of the Millican Nursery staff received a training specifically about spotted lanternfly. 2 trainings were held on the same day, back to back, in order to process everybody at the nursery through shifts. And so everybody could kind of get up close and personal with the specimens, as well as ask their questions that they had. There were a lot of really good questions from everything from what to look for and when, as to what their risks were and what they could do to help. So then we get to about January, February of 2021 when they're looking at ordering new material. And so when we look at these best management practices that we set up, it's focused on prevention, scouting, reporting, and response, with the majority of the best management practices focused on prevention, because of course New Hampshire doesn't consider itself to have established spotted lanternfly, and so the focus is on making sure it doesn't come in and establish. And so before they even received any new material, they looked at all of their orders and supplies, determined which ones were coming from nurseries that were in areas known to have spotted lanternfly, and then reached out with an email to those nurseries to let them know New Hampshire does not have spotted lanternfly. New Hampshire considers spotted lanternfly a risk, and that they would like to do their part to make sure it's not introduced and spread through their plant movement activities, and that they're checking in with their growers in order to be able to let the regulators know that they've talked with their growers, and they've also requested the growers in this email that went out to everybody as to the steps that they were taking to reduce the risk of spotted lanternfly moving into the state. So after they sent out this email, then the new material began to arrive. And what they did was that they had identified shipments that were coming in from the spotted lanternfly quarantine areas. So they knew when the trucks were coming in, and they had staff on hand that as these trees and shrubs were unloaded, they were laid down, which makes it much easier to see spotted lanternfly egg masses in the crown of the tree. If the trees are all laid down, they were like species and sizes were put together, and they left room between each tree in order to be able to walk around and look at the entirety of the tree. Plants that spotted lanternfly likes to lay eggs on, like red maple and willow, and we've seen quite a bit on Nyssa, are inspected twice by at least 2 different people. So if the egg masses are found, the Millican staff was then taking photos, noting the vendor that had sent the trees, and collecting the egg masses by carefully scraping them into a Ziploc bag. It's a 2-person job to make sure you don't drop any of the eggs out of the bag as you're scraping in. These egg masses that were then delivered to my staff, and we reared them at least to the first instar to make sure that they were viable. And in every case, the egg masses that were collected were viable. If they collected additional egg masses, because in some cases there were quite a few egg masses in the shipment, those were destroyed either by putting them into alcohol or by burning. All trees that had egg masses were marked with tree flagging for later monitoring, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And they tracked the location of these trees and maintained a file with the tree type, the number of trees that were found to have egg masses, and the number of egg masses found, as well as the supplier information. So after they would find the egg masses, they would contact us and say they had a shipment that came in with egg masses, and then I would send staff out who would look at that specific shipment again. And what we really determined is that the Millican staff was very good at finding spotted lanternfly egg masses. We may have found 1 or 2 additional egg masses on a shipment here or there, but for the most part, they were really identifying everything that that we could find, they had already found. And they would leave the trees laying down until we could get there so that it made it easier for us to also do our inspection before they finally placed the trees to where they were going to be maintained until sale. They shared openly all of the information about vendors with us, so that it made our job easier as the regulatory people. And often they also contacted the vendor about the fact that trees came in with spotted lanternfly egg masses. So after all of the trees have come in and been inspected, and then they have been tagged and placed, and they've got the specific flagging on them, staff doing their normal routine activities within the nursery could keep an eye out for spotted lanternfly life stages throughout the remainder of the growing season before the trees had been sold. And so the staff inspected flagged trees from June through September. All sales staff know what to look for when they're tagging flagged materials, so that as they're tagging the plant for sale, they know that they're looking for spotted lanternfly on that tree or on adjacent trees. And then we also, at my staff, placed some circle traps at various high-risk places throughout the nursery and did inspections there as well. And so then the next step after you've tagged the tree for sale is you're pulling it and getting it ready for loading to the customer. So all staff that pull and load plant material have gone through a training either conducted by my staff at the Department of Agriculture or by trained Millican staff such as Alan and Kayla. And they go through the training every year and they keep records of who was trained. All staff are aware of detections of egg masses in the spring and know the trees that are specifically tagged are those that came in with egg masses. All staff are on the lookout for egg masses, nymphs, and adults. Plants pulled for order are inspected at the site where they have been placed for the season. They're given a nice good shake just to encourage anything that might be on it to take a hop off before it's actually moved out of the block from where it is maintained. And then they are moved to the staging area or loading dock. And then the inspecting employee on the loading dock who does the final review of that tree before it actually leaves the property signs off that each plant has been inspected and no apparent SLF life stages were identified. Step 6 is treatment. So if SLF nymphs or adults are found, they notify the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture, and we go out and do an inspection and determine if a treatment is necessary. The treatment that has been used at Millican Nurseries was applied by their pesticide applicator, and it's a spray program of a knockdown application of bifenthrin. And then when nymphs or adults are found, Millican Nurseries is put under a compliance agreement, which has about the same items in the agreement that they're already doing as part of their best management practices, but it has a little bit more record keeping and oversight on those items. And the whole goal is to reduce the risk of spreading spotted lanternfly on Millican trees and shrubs and plants. So following a detection of a nymph or an adult, they're maintaining their shipping records. And then my staff is doing inspections at high risk blocks, which might be blocks that had egg masses or blocks where adults were found, as well as randomly selected blocks throughout the nursery. And then they're documenting the inspections by Millican staff of loaded plant material. And so the question is, was this effort successful? Because as I hope that I've demonstrated to you, this was a significant effort on the part of Millican Nursery staff to add this to an already very busy time of year, to do this kind of inspection for all of the trees that are coming up out of spotted lanternfly quarantine areas in the mid-Atlantic, which is where a lot of plant material moves into New Hampshire from. And so they wanted to keep spotted lanternfly out of their nursery, and the 2020 detection indicated that they needed to be more alert to the possibility of introduction on nursery stock. And the 2021 best management practice did indicate that they could successfully mitigate these risks. I want to make sure that I really reiterate that most of the shipments that they received from areas with spotted lanternfly were free of egg masses and other life stages of spotted lanternfly. And they felt that other vendors needed to improve in terms of their ability to remove spotted lanternfly life stages. They identified more than 55 egg masses on 16 shipments from 7 different nurseries in 2 different states. And it's more than 55 because if you look at this table, which indicates when they found the spotted lanternfly egg mass and the plant it was on, they've said how many egg masses there are. In some cases, they stopped counting at 20 or 15, just because it was quite a few. There were 2 adult spotted lanternfly that were found in September of 2021. Subsequent survey and trapping efforts found no other adults or any other life stages at the nursery. So if you go from 55 plus egg masses that came in on nursery stock that were found during inspection as part of their best management practices in 2021, and you go out to September and you've only got 2 adults, it shows that they very objectively reduced the risk of having spotted lanternfly at their nursery and spreading it to customers through the nursery stock pathway. Information provided to the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture by Millicans also identified several other New Hampshire receiving nurseries that got stock from the same locations. And we were able to go out and then inspect that nursery stock early enough in the season. We found one other location that had egg masses, and so we were able to remove those egg masses before they were allowed to hatch. On the part of Millican staff, nursery inspection was a very time-consuming task during a very busy time of year, and they believe that the risk mitigation should be done by the shipping nursery. And they also wanted to state that they did see improvement over the course of the season from the vendors, and they believe it's due to the detection of the egg masses, as well as communication between the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture and the origin state departments of agriculture. And they really appreciated the cooperation and the coordination that they have with us, as well as the cooperation coordination that we have with other state departments of agriculture, and the responsiveness that they had as well. And so that is all I had on that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes, Jessica, we do know where the trees with the egg masses came from. They did keep records of those, and so that did enable us to reach out to those state departments of agriculture. I get a little uncomfortable with providing that kind of information on an open forum like this. If the states that are involved with those nurseries want to make a comment on that, I think that they're welcome to do so. I'm not really willing to do that. So Kelly, did the 2020 find of spotted lanternfly impact sales from nurseries in infested states to New Hampshire nurseries? No. Did the No, not at all. We didn't implement any kind of specific quarantine now on states with spotted lanternfly. We don't have exterior spotted lanternfly quarantine in New Hampshire. We do talk with our nursery industry a lot about their buying power, and that if they do see repeat offenders that are sending them stock of a quality that they don't want, or are causing them to have a problem downstream, where they are now required to go out and put on insecticide sprays or mitigate a problem that should have happened, should have been mitigated at the point of origin, that they have the buying power to decide to go with another supplier. And I do know from talking with the state departments of agriculture in other states that this nursery is known as being kind of picky about the quality of the nursery stock that they get, because they really feel like they need to preserve their reputation for having high quality nursery stock. Tree species that egg masses were on were primarily red maple, some dogwood, some prunus, willow. One egg mass was found on a fairly large B&B hemlock, which was a really impressive find, considering like how challenging that bark is and the mud that was on it to find the egg mass. And that was found by the president of the company during inspection. How does Millican work upstream with their suppliers? Do they notify them? They notified them at the time of purchase that they would be looking for this. They do had communication back to the nurseries when egg masses were found. Really know. Oh, and I already kind of covered that. We've talked to them about maybe deciding to take their business elsewhere. I don't know that they have done that yet. I think that they want to work with those nurseries to get them into compliance with their origin state of not sending spotted lanternfly egg masses to New Hampshire, and have it be more of an educational experience rather than a burning the bridges experience at this point, understanding that it's so hard to find spotted lanternfly egg masses. Did any of the vendors that shipped spotted lanternfly egg masses follow up with their response? I'm wondering if new BMPs were implemented at the shipping nurseries. I'm not in the best position to answer that question. I believe from discussions with some of the states that were involved, that there was a revisit to look at their compliance agreements and to do a retraining. And we did see significant improvement. Millican said that they saw significant improvement from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. And Jay is here to let me know that I'm just about going to get pulled off of this, so that's fine. Are you going to set up traps this year at Millican? Probably. We have some traps. We put them up last year. We'll probably put them up again this year. And yes, the nursery is voluntarily participating with New Hampshire Agriculture. Yes. And so we are doing some training with some of the other nurseries, and we are actually got a Farm Bill or a PPA 7721 outreach project, which is focused on trying to have other nurseries implement this as well. And it would be additional work for them, in all fairness. And so it is voluntary. It's not clear to me that with the risks that New Hampshire has in place, in terms of us having very low grape production in a very cold climate, that a quarantine is really the way that we would want to go as a state, due to the concerns I have about whether or not we'd see significant establishment in the state. Did you stop the entire shipment or just trees with egg masses? When we first found spotted lanternfly at their nursery in 2020, we sold the entire nursery. And then we tried to release it from the stop sale as quickly as possible so that they could get the other nursery stock moving. And the trees were all treated in blocks where we found either egg masses or spotted lanternfly adults, as well as adjacent blocks. And am I concerned about that nurseries that do not have such a program. I am, and we look for spotted lanternfly egg masses at every nursery we go to, and we try to hit the big ones that are bringing in a lot of nursery stock early in the season, and specifically target the red maples to look for things. Like I said, we did find egg masses at one other nursery, and I think that the more work that can be done at the very start of the origin nurseries to try to make sure that these are out of production helps everybody downstream. And like I said before, most of the shipments that they got from the spotted lanternfly quarantine area were free of egg masses. The overwhelming majority were. There was just this group that was not. And the communication between the company and the other state departments of agriculture helps bring everybody up to that level of compliance.
Okay. Piera, I'm going to cut you off. Sorry.
Perfect. Good. And I'll answer this one. I'll type the answer. Okay. Thanks, Jay.
Okay, perfect.